This is episode 39. Wow, we're 39 episodes in already. And I am with Bob. Bob, can you pronounce your last name for me? I don't want to
Yeah,
butcher it.
Palestrant.
Palestrant. All right. Well, Bob, thank you very much for joining me. I greatly appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Uh, so this was, I actually got a message from, oh, what was his name? Charlie.
Charlie
Got a message
Friedman?
from Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie Friedman.
Yeah, this is back at the end of April, and he sold you pretty good. I'll
Yeah.
tell you that.
Well, that's a funny story. I'll explain that to you as we go along.
Sure. But so he had sent me an email, like I said, back at the end of April, and was kind of telling me a little bit about you, and we'll get to this a little bit later on. But he was telling about a book that you wrote called Never on a 10,
Yeah.
and I started reading it. My goal was to have it completely read before our interview, but life has kicked in drastically. Getting ready to go to Florida to take my kid to Disney World, so I got a plane ride there that I can read it and the plane ride back.
I hope you saved your money. It's expensive now.
So quick story about that. We got really lucky. Um, we our hotel is free. Um, it's 5 days, 4 nights, and then I have air miles, so we're using air miles for our flight. Was able to get, I think we only had to pay like $30 after my air miles
It's
for
pretty good.
all three of our tickets, there and back. So the only thing we're gonna have to pay for is food and Disney World, which, in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty cheap compared to what it could be.
Well, if I told you what I paid for my first ticket to Disney, it sort of shows my age too, you know. It was $17 for a day.
Yeah, it's definitely not that anymore.
No, no.
I was actually telling somebody at work today too, and they were saying just about 20, 25 years ago it only cost them about $30 a ticket.
Yeah.
I wish it was still that price. So Bob, let's go ahead and just start a little bit about growing up. Where'd you grow up at?
Well, I'm originally from Boston area, Massachusetts. I was born up there. And my mom passed away when I was 7. My little brother was 3. So my dad decided it was time to relocate, start a new life, and came down to South Florida because his brother lived down here. And completely different, environment than what you used to say the least. Uh, so I've been here since 1959. So we might as well get it right out there right now. I am 73 years old. I was born in 1952. Okay, you want the jokes? Go for it now. But I've been here. I've been here a long, long time. Uh, it's funny because I remember coming down here, and the first hurricane we went through was not while we're driving. It had just passed through in late 1959, and you have no idea what a 7-year-old looks like. That and like, oh my God, what happened here? I hope this isn't like this everywhere across Florida. So came down here. Uh, went public school, uh, not too far from where we were living. Kicked it around for a while. When I graduated from high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but as most kids do. And being a firefighter never really came into the mix at that point because I didn't know any firefighters. So I had gotten married at a relatively young age, 22, the first go around, and I was working. I went over to work in one of the local hospitals as an ER tech, and then became an EMT, and I became a paramedic. And while I was there, and then I realized that I had guys coming from two different departments. What is now known as Miami-Dade, we used to be Metro-Dade Fire Rescue, and Hialeah, which is a local municipality. And going, man, you got to try out for the position, try to get hired. So I did. 10 years running, I kept putting my name in the hat and never getting hired, and getting good scores on the test. But the demographics were wrong. There were multiple lists, and I didn't meet that criteria at the time. And finally, I had a buddy who I grew up with who also went in the fire service, and he says, "Hey, get down there now. They're hiring paramedics for the first time." So I was on a paramedic list. Went that route, but in the meantime, while I'm waiting, because it's 3, 4, 5 years sometimes, I went to nursing school, and I was working the night shift over at the hospital. So I'm working 11 to 7 night shift, going to a nursing school all day, which is probably the two worst combinations. You do a night shift and then all day school and trying to take care of people. So it was interesting, but you do what you got to do, right? If it's, we've all been in that boat. You either work multiple jobs, you do whatever is necessary to support your family and make things happen, make things work. So in '84, I got the call, and we went down. I was hired. I was surprised, uh, and stayed with it for with fire service for 38 years. But a lot of things happen en route, and I wrote about some of these stories and stuff that we saw because it changes your perspective on everything. But because I worked in a hospital, I worked as a nurse before that. I'd seen a lot of trauma because we were part of what they call the trauma network. They had trauma hospitals, and down there they had a trauma network. So we had seen considerable amount of things that happened. So but you get very desensitized to it, you know, and people who say they don't are probably full of it. You do. And the worst of it is taking those things home to your families. And it always happens. And, you do your best you can. You try to separate your professional from your personal life uh, to the extent of not taking your professional problems home. And I know we can take our personal problems to the station and talk to the guys, and they'll talk to you. And they can always recognize this. You having a bad day? Everybody has a bad day, bad week, bad month. Come on, we're going to go outside. We're going to talk about to see what's going on. And, and it happens that way. But when I got in the fire service, man, I was just so happy. I didn't care. I would work anywhere, anytime. And then uh, I was sent down to an area in Liberty City, and they call it's Battalion 5, which is the busiest battalion in the entire county. And I was like, oh my God, this place is absolutely great. It was a whole different mindset from the slower stations. 7 o'clock was the shift start, and everybody was in the house at 6:30, and already had 2-3 cups of coffee to get wound up and get moving. The trucks are, the music's playing, the trucks are getting checked, everything is moving fast. It's great, and everybody get along. We had a real diverse community too. Didn't matter black, white, Hispanic, male, female, everybody got along great. And a lot of those people are still my friends right now to this day. I'm talking almost 40 years later. So I had no intent of ever getting promoted. I was very happy. I had good crews. I got the bid at the station, which everybody says, how do you get a bid? It's like, it's not hard to get a bid at the busiest station because you're not fighting a lot of people who want that spot. And from being a firefighter medic, and then I took a lieutenant's exam, and I got right back into the battalion. And I'll tell you how busy the battalion was. Station 2, which was a station, a main station, Battalion 5, 2 years running was by Firehouse Magazine, was the busiest firehouse in North America for 2 years running. And I was riding a rescue mostly. And back then we used, instead of an engine, we had an aerial. And we were running between the two, probably 40 to 45 calls a shift. And rescues run 25 to 30. And we had a battalion chief, but the battalion chief would run with us. Not on, he wouldn't, he or she wouldn't run calls on their own necessarily. But you don't mind it because you come to work with the mindset, man, I'm gonna work hard, but I'm gonna have a great time because you love the guys, you love the people you're working with. When I say guys, I mean men and women, but you love the people you work with, and it makes it that much easier. And when you can trust the people next to you to do their jobs, it makes your job that much easier. But you have to babysit or watch somebody, it's a whole different animal. And there was none of that down there. So, but
So I think there was a couple points that I kind of want to go back to a little bit. So you mentioned um when you went to Station 2 in Battalion 5, was that right?
yeah,
Battalion 5. So when you mentioned that everybody was getting there at 6:30 at their start time. Obviously, your normal start time was 7 o'clock, but
right.
people were just getting there early to help with. And you talk about this in the book, but they were getting there early in order to help the crew that's leaving to try to help keep them from getting a late call.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming the department or the station that you were at before that, and I think you mentioned this too, people weren't doing that. The crews were coming in like at 7 o'clock, and if you got a late run, you were just kind of screwed.
Yeah, it's not all the stations, and that doesn't really matter in that case
Sure.
if it's slow or busy. but you see it more in the slower stations, unfortunately. And you probably heard the term Minutemen. And a Minuteman is somebody, if they're going to start a shift at 7 a.m., they're going to sit in their car until 6:59 before you come in. It's like, no, man, go in or relieve the people because, like you said, if you get a late call at 6:45, you might be gone for 2 hours. You got kids, you got a second job, and back then everybody had a second job because it was absolute necessity to make ends meet, and you want to do your best for help because you want the same thing done for you. If you need that help, they're going to be there and do that. And a lot of times I get a call from somebody, hey, can you come in 20 minutes early? Yeah, no problem. I'm there. And that's just because they had to do something or go someplace. No, we don't ask questions. If somebody asks that, it's legitimate. But the whole thing comes is it's that, and it's also get the camaraderie of everybody getting involved. The other part of it too is where we want to steal the calls from the shift before. If it's a good call, we are go. I had guys steal calls from me. There was a ship buyer down at the port of Miami, and I was on shift coming off. This was later on as a captain, and it's like 20 to 7, and I run out, and the lieutenant is replacing me because we have a captain on the rescue, captain on the engine on different shifts. He threw my gear off. He threw his gear and he locked the door so I couldn't get in. And I'm screaming at him, "Get out! This is my call! Get out! Get out!" And he's shooting me a bird. He's laughing at me, and he took the call. And they were gone for 4.5, 5 hours. It was a major ship fire, you know.
Oh
And
wow.
but that's the mindset. I got to have the fires. I got to have the calls. I want the really good calls, the traumas, and so on. But you can't
Well,
get
and
mad at somebody.
I think the big thing with that too is, you know, there's there's a difference in attitude, a difference in culture. When you have the crews that are coming in early to relieve you, one, they're doing it because they love their job, but two, they obviously are accepting the fact that this is a family. They're looking out for you guys, even though you guys don't work the same shift together. They're looking out for you, you're looking out for them. And clearly, the ones, and this isn't meant to attack anybody, but I think this is a good thing that everybody needs to hear. If you're coming in as a Minuteman at 7 o'clock on the dot, or you're waiting in your vehicle, your attitude is probably not the greatest. Like, you probably aren't, you're just not in a good spot. You're not all in, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And the funny thing was, things have obviously changed over the years. But back then, uh, if we had somebody who didn't have the attitude we are looking for, and the attitude was very simple: you come to work to work. You can have a great time, but you're not coming here to be by yourself. You're living there with 7 other people, including the battalion chief, and you interact, you share meals, you do everything. If you're on by yourself, you're in the wrong house. You know, we didn't have nowadays, I think every cubicle, now they have cubicles. We had rooms where everybody slept in open dorms. And the guy who snored is the one who got kicked out and had to sleep in the day room. Now everybody's got cubicles. They changed from the claxons that we used to wake us up going, wake everybody up. That was it. Your heart's pumping out. Now it's the softer, general ringtones that go off, and it's specifically in certain areas of certain stations because you don't want to wake the rescue if it's for the engine call. It's like, give me a break. I understand
We
it.
have the lights flick on and then
Oh,
the loud
and they all
siren and the
have
whole
their
nine
own little
yards.
cubicles, and they have we got. But I understand to a certain extent, especially when you went to more women in the fire service. Give them a little bit of privacy. It's a necessary thing.
Sure.
But again, yeah, the whole thing is look out for your brother or sister firefighters, both on the shift but off the shift. We fought with the other shifts, but it was a joke type fight. It's one of those deals. Is we're going to argue and fight with you like brothers and sisters, but if it ever comes down to it, you got your back. Just like
Yeah.
you've probably seen it, county and city firefighters supposedly hate each other. That's garbage. We'll give each other a hard time, but if it came down to it, we're all brothers and sisters. We watch each other's
You know,
back.
it's funny that you mentioned that. So we ran into that situation here locally. So I was on the county for fire, and I was with the city for EMS. And we were always told that there was this big beef between county and city when it came to fire. And finally, I think I had only been in for not even a whole year, maybe a little bit more than a year. we catch a structure fire with the city, and we're working together perfectly. Like, we're helping each other out. Some of us are splitting up and, combining together, city and county. We're
Sure.
all working together to fight this fire. And I went to somebody, I was like, hey, what happened to this beef between city and county? Because we worked awesome together. Come to find out, the beef isn't with the black hats or the crews on the ground. The beef's with the higher ups. The higher ups don't like each other for whatever reason, and they're making it seem like we all don't like each other.
Well, I'd heard that same thing too. And then when I wind up going up the chain of command and become part of one of those white shirts that we would not make it, for instance, a working fire. We used to call it Code One. We wouldn't make it a Code One because we didn't want the white shirts showing up. We were happy with the battalion chief. We didn't want the division. And then when I became one of the white shirts, we found out a couple things. One is, with talking to the cities or other, we had a great relationship with these guys because we grew up with them in the street, you know, and then we knew each other. We give each other a hard time. We'd mess them. When I meet somebody and they go, "Oh, we're going to talk to city guys." Well, said you've already spoken to the best right now in the county, so you can let them know that you talk to me. Talk to me, because and I know I'm hearing some crap about that, but that's okay. You love that kind of stuff. And there are a lot of things that you're gonna disagree on and how things are done. And you know how it is. Doesn't matter who you work for. You're the best in the business. You see all the good all calls. You make the best runs. You probably make the best chili. For you guys now, we obviously make the best Cuban coffee. Which if you haven't had that, you come down here. We will definitely get you hooked up. But I
Try that
think
out.
that's really overblown. I think in the long run, you know, we look out for each other. I have a lot of friends who are city, multiple municipalities, and to this day, I mean, it's like it is what it is.
Yeah, I had just left the fire service, so this was probably around 22, and my department, so right across the street from our department was actually the city, and my department was the county. And there was a structure fire literally right across the street. So my department jumped on their rigs, went right over, started fighting the fire while letting dispatch know that, hey, there's a fire here. This is cities, send them out. The assistant chief at the time, no longer assistant chief, comes up on the radio on city dispatch, general fire radio, and says, get county off of my fire.
Wow.
The captain of that station came up and said, I will as soon as the fire's out. Oh, he was heated. He made it well known over the air how mad he was about it.
Yeah, I love a decision making when you're not unseen. You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. That
you know as
armchair
well I
quarterback.
do. Hey, all hands on deck. If you got help, you accept the help. You know,
100%.
but
So let's back up just a little bit more. So you were a nurse for a little bit. How long were you a nurse for?
I graduated from nursing school in '81, and I continued to work even after I got an apartment until '96, in a part-time basis. So I started in the hospital in '75, I believe. For you ancient guys, that's a ways back. But like I said, I was working as an ER tech, became the EMT, fought my way into paramedic school because, interesting enough, back then the rule was to get in paramedic school, you had to work for a fire department. But to work for the fire department, you had to be a paramedic. So it's a catch-22. And and I drove them nuts. So what they said, you go ahead and apply. Go ahead and apply. Now, this is well before cell phones. So I'm working at the hospital, but I'm also doing other jobs. And I'm carrying um, coins in my pocket for payphones. And I'm calling the school twice a day. And I'm saying, and finally, at one point, the guy around the program said, listen, I'm tired of hearing from this guy. Put him in the next damn program already. So that's basically how I got into the paramedic program early on.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I stayed working as a nurse till '96 in different capacities. Uh, always in the ER. I was always an ER guy. I always looked at the ER as a parts department. I was never one. I didn't want to. Don't take this the wrong way. I didn't want to build a relationship with a patient. I wanted to fix what had to be fixed, keep them alive, and pass them off to ICU or whoever else. Let's go bring the
I
next
mean,
one in.
it's similar to EMS. It's same
Exactly,
thing.
exactly. And I know a lot of people work in ICU, and I give them a lot of credit because you lose somebody there, somebody now. And where us, it's like
Mhm.
we're mechanics. We're going to take care of broken bones or disease processes, and we're doing the best we can, keeping them alive for 3 or 4 hours. Back then, 3 or 4. Now it's probably 3 or 4 days in the ER sometimes because it's so busy.
Yeah, that's the same situation here. My wife is actually she's a nurse practitioner for a trauma hospital. She works specifically with the trauma team.
Yes,
So
you understand.
she's all over the place. She's in the ER, she's in the ICU. I mean, she's all over the place, but um yeah, she totally gets both worlds. And she also was an EMT on the fire department with me for a little while as well. She went through the EMT class. This was right around when we first met. Went through the EMT class, got her EMT, went on our first call, and she goes, "This is stupid. I don't have anything." I said, "Welcome
Yeah,
to EMS."
welcome to our world.
Yeah,
Well,
but
funny you bring
she
that up.
did.
Yeah, funny you bring that up because one of the things I used to do was I was required to train some of the medics to work in the ER. Now, as an EMT, as I was ER tech, and I'm training guys that came in the fire department. You know how the process works. They get overtime for a certain amount of hours. Well, they work the deal and they're getting almost 3 times what I'm getting paid, and I'm training them. It's like this is garbage. I got to get the hell out of this job, for starters. But for the most part, when I got hired by the fire department, I still had the relations with the hospital. So what I offered, I said, well, have the nurses come ride with fire rescue, and I want to have the guys in fire rescue go to the ER. Okay, because there's two things they need to look at. Nurses, in general, nurses are really good about how they handle it and how they deal with us. Uh, but you always have one or two. It's like, why didn't you intubate this patient, or why didn't you do this, or look, you missed this one. Well, I've intubated people. I intubated somebody. Now this, remember, South Florida, hot. They were on the ground, and it was like 12:30 in the afternoon on the pavement. So I said, okay, I'm getting on the pavement, my short sleeve jumpsuit, and I've got probably 20 seconds or less before my arms start burning. But meanwhile, I know the patient's burning too underneath on that pavement. So you have no choice to do it. I've intubated people standing in a closet. Remember the snake lights they used to sell at Home Depot? Wrap around your neck.
Mm-hmm.
I carried once specifically for those reasons. So you know that you get in the homes and there's no lighting, there's nothing, and or you're going through somebody's home that's nothing but newspapers and everything else, afraid it's going to collapse on them, and you're working on this. And the nurses don't see this, but at the same time, the medics don't see. The nurses don't get the break from going from the patient that they just dropped off, and now they may have a little break. There is no break. It's okay. Now you got 10 more waiting for you, and it just goes on and on and on. So it gave them a greater appreciation of what both of them do. Hopefully.
So, in your book, you talked about going through the fire academy, and there was a special training for when you first started that almost took you out of the program entirely. Can you
Yeah.
talk about that?
This was one of the most ridiculous things I'd ever seen. So my two vices in the world. First of all, I got to say, I didn't start drinking coffee till I was 32 years old when I got on the fire department. And I'm surprised I didn't start smoking cigarettes because back then my partners were drinking a glass of coffee and smoking a cigarette on 25, 30 calls. It means that it's a cup of coffee and a cigarette every call. And I started drinking coffee. But when I still go to the gym 2, 3 times a week, try to stay in shape, you know. But when we got on this, they had this thing. I don't know, and we know that what happens is the physical agility tests are not designed by firefighters for any reason. They're designed by somebody in HR, wherever else. So they had what they called the golf ball tests. So you were supposed to put 3 golf balls down by your left foot, keep your legs locked, all right, reach down with your right hand across your body and pick a ball up, put it in your left hand, and then reach down across your right side of your body and put the ball down, do it 3 times. Well, on my best day, I can't touch my toes. Never could.
I can't either.
So, I mean, okay, I'm done. And with 3 other guys, and we're all. I mean, I probably at the time when I got on, I was probably about 210. I'm a little bigger now, not by choice, but every one of us were 200 pounders, 6'2", 6'3", and like, oh my God, we've lost everything we tried to get for all these years. Luckily, there was an LT there who I never knew. I'm still friends with this day, and I remind him of this every time I see him. And I said, I said, LT, we're going against everything they teach you in taking care of your body. You bend with your knees. You don't bend from the back. He goes, you're absolutely right. He says, this is bullshit. He says, I'm taking us over to the captain. And he took a couple of the LLTs there, and they all went to the captain. And we were out there for probably 20 minutes. And they came out and go, you're good. We're getting rid of this. We're going to take it up to the top, and this has got to be gone. And they saved our jobs. Absolutely saved our jobs. So, it's one thing I always think
Yeah,
about. Think about the things that people did for you and do it for somebody else. Pay it forward. Always look out for the guy come up to the bike because they don't know what's going on. Teach them what's right, but teach them what to look out for too.
100%. So let's kind of jump through just a little bit. So you've been on the fire department now for a little while, we'll say, and well, how's life? Well, you moved to Battalion 5. So how was life looking working in Battalion 5?
Oh my God, it was great. I can't tell you. I mean, it was like, yes, we worked our asses off, but it was like, and I went home, I was exhausted, but it was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. And it was funny because when I first got on, they had battalion captains, and they eventually changed out to battalion chiefs. So the battalion captain that I had and when I first got on, what happened was I got sick. And as a rookie, you don't want to get sick. You don't want to lose any time. I was actually calling sick because I was so sick for 4 days. And he says, I'm going to send you down to Battalion 5, straighten you out and all this. And, anything you say, sir, wherever you want to put me. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't care. He says, okay, you're heading south. South wasn't south. South is central. Miami-Dade County is 60 linear miles across. So I'm only going to the midpoint of the county at this point. So I go down there, like I said, it was amazing. And the guys were all great. And then the battalion captain there, who became battalion chief, great guy. He says, hey, you're going to get a call from your previous battalion, and he's going to ask if you want to come back. And I said, well, Cap, can I say no? He goes, you can say no, but expect some repercussions. He says, he's going to bounce you all over the county, but stick with it. He'll give you a few shifts, maybe, a couple weeks, and you'll get back here after it blows over. I said, okay. So I told him, and he says, okay, Palestrant, you're ready to come back? I said, sir, it's all the same to you. I'll stay here. And then he starts cussing me out on the phone. Okay, I'm living it. Next shift, boom. It's far south. I mean, could have been the furthest south station that we had. No problem. Now, the guys at 2, I've only been there for 3 months, and they're great people. So they know where I'm going because they're talking to their battalion captain, right? Where's Bob? Where's he going? They're calling the station 3 times a day. Hey, we had a fire. Hang up. Hey, we had a shooting. Hang up. Hey, we had this call. And you're missing all these calls. It's like, but you deal with it. And he was right. He said, after a few months, by about 2 more months, back in Battalion 5 and never left there until I got out of operations. So I served as a firefighter, lieutenant, and a captain. And I had the bids in all 3 positions. The only bid I didn't get in Battalion 5 was battalion chief.
What did you end up doing? You did battalion chief though, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. I did battalion chief because actually I promoted through to be battalion chief. And to me, it's really important. I turned down the division chief spot twice as I was a captain. And one chief who I still know and I still get along with. I see him periodically. He says, I'd like you to come up and be a division chief. I said, Chief, no disrespect, but I can't be a captain working for one battalion chief today and tomorrow being his boss and the boss of 4 of the battalions. We had 15 battalions. We had at the time, I think, probably almost 3,000 people in the department. And he says, I respect that. I understand. And I said, at some point, maybe I'll consider it. But I said, so I did my time as a captain. I took the battalion chief test, which was a story in itself. I don't know if you got that part in the book. So
I haven't gotten that far yet.
I'll leave that for you to.
All right.
Unless you want me to talk about it, it's up to you. So took the battalion.
We could talk about it.
Sure. So I had no intention of taking the chief's test this year, and I'm home. And my wife even said, "Aren't you signed up for the chief's test?" I don't think so. And it's getting closer and closer. It's the Tuesday before the test, and I said, Tomorrow's the last day. I think I'm going to sign up. She goes, are you crazy? You haven't studied. I said, I'll study this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So I grabbed the coffee pot. I went on the back porch. I studied from 8 o'clock to 12 noon. I left and went to the gym for 2 hours, came back, studied for another 4, did it on Sunday. I had no expectations of doing anything. I had to be on duty on Monday, and the test is on Tuesday. Go to work on Monday, typical shift, running. 2 o'clock in the morning, we get a call for overturned vehicle, uh, single unit response, rescue 2. I copy that, and we'll go to the call. And I get there, I see overturned van or some kind of similar type of vehicle. I said, let me have Squirt 2. Squirt was the aerial. Didn't ask for an assignment, didn't ask for a battalion. As I got closer, do a 360, I get closer, I see arms and legs sticking out. Then I said, let me have the battalion. Because now we have, looks like, but the number of legs and arms I counted, I figured at least 6. And we had, I think it was like 8 people in there. The downside of that was that some were dead and some were alive, and the dead ones were on top of the ones who were alive. We got TRT involved, and again, we're piecemealing this instead of saying give us a multiple arm assignment. No, we don't want the white shirts. We'll handle this. Besides, 2 o'clock in the morning, we got it done. We can do this. We've always done this. So I had about 30 plus people on scene, and we have to get in and get these kids, and these kids are freaking out and screaming. And to get one kid, we literally had to cut a leg off to get to this kid's head, to get him, let him breathe, and then pull them out. And so we did that. And this was like, again, this is like probably a 4.5 hour call. So the same lieutenant who stole the call from me, what I was telling you before, locked the doors and shot me a bird. He comes to the scene the next morning and says, take my truck so you guys can leave. I know you got to take the chief's test. So I hand him over the radio, which has got a hunk of meat on it, on top of that. And I get into his private truck, and he didn't care. I got blood all over me. This is what I'm talking about, the camaraderie. I run back, and I go in, and they had a guys moving up from a slower station. And I was pissed because they hadn't made coffee. They're sitting in the recliners. Jesus, you guys couldn't even put a pot of coffee on. I jump in the shower. I fly down to take the test. Zero expectation. I barely keep my eyes open. And I figured, okay, I'm here. I just did it. It's help be it. And I come back and I wound up passing the test and being in, I think it was number 12 on the list, which, a lot of places you don't make more than 2 battalions. They made 20. That's how big the department was. And it was like, okay, that was unexpected. But it's like, okay, now. And the funny thing about being a battalion chief is I almost gave it up because when you're a battalion chief or battalion captain in certain areas, it changes what you do. You are not one of the guys anymore. You are and you aren't. You're in between. You're part of administration. You're part of the operations. But you're in your office a lot of times. And you hear the yelling and the laughing and the screaming, but you're not really part of it. And sometimes you go out there and the guys if you guys don't know you, it gets quiet. Yes, chief. It's like, no, stop, guys, stop, And at some point I was talking to another buddy of mine who had made battalion, and he said the same thing. He said, yeah, I was thinking about giving it up, but I didn't like this. I said, but look, I said, this guy's Tony Garcia, great guy. But Tony, what I realized though is we're here for a reason. We're here to support our troops, to make sure they get the resources they need, the tools they need, make sure we give them what they need, train them appropriately, and get the hell out of their way. We don't micromanage. I've never been a micromanager. And I realized that, okay, and that was the same reason about moving up to division or above. It's like, I'll be a voice. I'll be the outlier. I don't have a problem with that. I never had a personal agenda. I knew I wasn't going to make it to the top because I don't care. I'm in there. Basically, I love this job. I appreciate what I got. It took me 10 years to get it. And I want to make it the best situation possible for the people that are working under me.
That's awesome. I've never been, I can't say never. I've held leadership roles before in fire and EMS. About the highest I went was a captain. I was an EMS captain for my department. And then when I went away to another city to do EMS for a while, we did 24-hour shifts. It wasn't a 24-48. It was some oddball rotation. But I was a shift supervisor for 2 stations out there. I can't imagine being a battalion chief. I've got some good friends that have been in that position before, but that's a little too much responsibility for me.
Yeah, it was interesting in a lot of respects. And the thing is, you've got to prove yourself at every level, and you're always going to have people who test you. I mean, I had people testing me, lieutenant or captain as well, and they always say, "Well, how do you work with your friends?" I said, "Yeah, it's never a problem. The guys that I worked with that were my colleagues and my supervisors, now I'm their supervisor, they're not the ones that give you a hard time. They're the ones that say, I'm going to make your life as easy as possible. And especially when you're working the busy stations where you don't have to ever tell a guy, how to hump hose, where to lay it, what tools to bring. It's done. You're getting there, and you'd be surprised if the fire's still going by that time, you know. But there's always people going to test you, you know.
Yeah, so kind of sticking with that, how do you handle that situation when you've got, maybe you've got one whole station that decides they're going to test you, or maybe it's just a couple guys, whatever. How did you handle those situations?
I didn't have it that much at Dade. I did have it at it later on when I retired and I went over to work for Broward Fire Rescue, Broward Sheriff's Fire Rescue. I'll talk about that later. But for the most part, it's funny. The guys that test you are the guys that have been on a long time. It's rarely the new guys. And it's usually somebody who did not want to get promoted. And you know how it is. You got the informal leaders and the formal leaders. When the informal leader is good and does it for the right reasons, it's great. When you get an informal leader who's right off the bat when you say, why don't you get promoted? I don't want any part of that. I don't need that. I'm doing this. Then why are you giving out ideas on how to do things or not doing it? You're telling us there's problems here. Okay. You can bring me the problems, but bring me a resolution. If you have a good resolution, I don't care what your rank is. Come on in and we'll take it over. I learned a long time ago too, is the chief that I finally went to work for, he said, you can coach and counsel somebody as many times as you think necessary. He was not a big believer in discipline, neither am I. I think in my whole career, I had 2 disciplinary actions, which is pretty good over, 38 years. But for the most part, you take the guy aside, put your arm around him, talk to him, and a lot of people, when somebody go, cap or chief or so on, I'm really sorry, I won't do that. It won't happen again. It won't happen again. But when the sentence continues to go, cap, but okay, but nothing, and that's when you go, okay, we're gonna have to have a more of a little chat on this. And then you start. Sometimes you have to look through their files. And funny, back then everything was paper files, and we had to chase paper all over the county. Now it's easy. Pull up on their computer, it's there. And you'd be surprised how many of these guys are like, Jesus, they do this everywhere they go, and they don't bid in. They rather float and go from station to station because there's no accountability. There's nothing, especially the officers, because they say, "Oh, I'm here today, but you're going to train when you have your regular officer here." No, you train every day. You know, you train like not just your life depends on it, but the people you're serving's life depend on
As it does.
it. It does, yes.
Yeah, 100%. So after going the battalion chief route, where'd you go from there?
So I stayed for a battalion for about a year and a half, and uh, that was really short time frame for me because I was a firefighter for 7. I was a lieutenant for 6 and a captain for no, it's firefighter for 7, a lieutenant for 7, and a captain for 6. And it was like, okay, battalion is short. But then then this chief, this second chief had offered me a position. I said, no, thanks, chief. I appreciate it, but I want to stay where I am, and I love it out in the field. But when the new chief came in, um, I met with him, and I said, he says, "Are you ever interested in coming into administration?" I said, "Well, chief, can I speak freely?" He goes, "Absolutely." And I said, "I have a problem with your command staff. Number one, you have guys walking around 3-piece suits with a badge on their belt, like they're cops or like they're somebody special." So he says, "Okay, time out." He says, "I'm already addressing that. That will stop. We will wear uniforms." I said, "You understand it took me 10 years to get this job. 10 years. I wear this uniform proudly. I hate the tie. I couldn't tie a tie until I was 55 years old, but I would wear the tie if that's what requires it. But, be proud of what you have. Not, oh, it's I'm here and I'm happy to be a chief in some respect. And the other thing he said was, which really struck me, was he says, you know, the pyramid, the triangle with the top, the chief is at the top of the pyramid. He goes, that doesn't work. He says, you turn that pyramid upside down. The chief should be at the bottom. Your personnel should be at the top. And he's telling me about anything that comes in, whether it's training, perks, anything should go to your people. I said, you sold me. I said, I'm in. I'll do it. And I went in and I went back to operations as a division chief, which no complaints there, man. It was great. It was the first thing they said to us was, there was two of us working out of Central, and we would cover, one would cover North, one would cover South. Now, at the time, I'm thinking we had roughly, I don't know, 2,600 people. It was below 3 grand. No, actually, it was close to 3,000. So first thing he said was, you have the bid system, and you have, hey, there's a CR day or a Kelly day available. So they came to us, and my buddy Kenny, who worked the other shift, he goes, all right, one of you guys is going to have to take a Saturday CR, and one's going to have to take a Sunday CR. And I'm looking at him like, really? So I said, Kenny, what do you want? He goes, I'll take Sunday. You want Saturday? I go, I'm in. I said, how did that happen? So the only thing was, on a Sunday, I had the entire county under my belt. And, roughly we're looking at, I don't know, 70 some odd stations, I think, at the time. And I'm one of those guys, even when I was a lieutenant, a firefighter, we didn't have the radios. I became a lieutenant and a captain. I used to sleep with my handheld on my chest. I didn't get undressed. I didn't get under a blanket. I would throw a cover over. It was cold, and I'd sleep in my blue jumpsuit when we wore those. But the radio would be turned on ever so slowly, and I could hear. And the guys in the busy stations don't care. They don't mind that, because you listen to the tones. You get the tones going off for each station, and you start to learn which tones are yours, which tones are the ones next to you, and all of a sudden you're popping out of bed. So you don't get any REM sleep. You're popping up, and we're already on the truck before our tones go off. And that's a sign of pride too. Jumping out and beating everybody else to the fire, steal their fire from them. But yeah, so went to there and I worked for him, and in multiple roles. Then he says, and it was funny. Says, I needed to come on in and be the admin chief. I said, Chief, I don't know crap about administrator. I'm not an administrator. He goes, I know that. He says, you're a project guy. I need to start some projects. And you look at programs, tell me what, and help me out. I said, okay. So I had a great relationship with the cops, and for going back for years. And one of the majors and I were hitting. It was here we are. How do we do this? How can we make it to the top like this? And I told him one day, I said, look, I got a question for you. I said, you guys, your SWAT team used to run on calls. You'd give us 3 days notice, shift notice. You're going to run this call on this house at this time on this day. And you're giving us 3 days advance notice. Then it slowly became the same day notice, but it was in the morning. Then it was an hour notice. So I said, what I want to do is I want to put this in place where you guys tell us at least in the morning, if not before, so I can get my guys and put them out of service for an hour before your call comes out. And that way they can sit and have dinner. Because what happens is they're running straight through. Then they're running a SWAT call. They're not getting any meals. And they got to go do the whole thing all over again. And he says, yeah, no problem. So I went to this chief at one point. I said, I said, hey, Chief, do you mind if I try to start the SWAT medic program? And he says, well, but I understand they've been trying for 30 years and they couldn't get it done. Well, the chief of police, two chiefs of police who I knew from Metro-Dade, I was friends with. They trusted me. They knew me. And all the majors. I said, do you mind if I try? He says, go for it. 8 months later, I had the SWAT medic program up and running. And the funny thing about that is, that is one of the Miami-Dade Police Department, which is now the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Department, has one of the toughest SWAT programs in the country. They say it's as close to military as you could possibly get for special operations people. People would be dying, puking their guts up. My guys were in such good shape. None of them failed. Usually it's they said like a 50 to 60% fail rate. They were losing cops. They didn't lose a single firefighter. And before they started, though, it was funny because they said, well, your guy's going to have a handgun, like a 40 or 45. They have to have their own shotgun, their own AR-15. I go, Oh, I don't know about. I have a gun, but I don't. I don't even know where the gun is. I'm not one of those guys. They go, okay. There's a couple of guys go, no, 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 relax, chief. We got it. I got extra. I got extra ammo. And a lieutenant of mine, who she's not, she wasn't a program. She was a corrections officer, a police officer, Ningman Fire Rescue, and she goes, and again, first name basis. She says, Bob, I've got this. I got 4 AR-15s if you need them. I said, Diane, what the hell? She goes, I got a 50 cal too if you need that. Where'd you get that? She goes, I got it from my dad. But these guys went through and it was amazing. And the program, my understanding, it's been revamped a couple of times, but it's still up and running for this day. And that was the whole thing. He gave me free leeway and a lot of stuff. They had me go to a emergency management, which would in emergency management of the county, you went from either the mayor's office to the fire department to the mayor's office to the fire department. So I came back to the fire department, and I'm a certified emergency manager through what they call the International Association of Emergency Managers. At the time, there were only, when I joined, it was like, where I got that, it was like 1,500 worldwide. I think it's up to about maybe 4,000 worldwide. Still a small group. So he put me in charge of that for a short time. And as I told you before, I'm not politically correct. I believe in let's go to point A to point B. Let's get it done, do our jobs. I don't care about political agendas. And I get calls from downtown. Hey, we need you to come down here for a meeting. Can we do this on the phone? No, we need you to come down here. So I got a 45-minute ride to downtown Miami, where the county hall was, to sit outside for 15 minutes to talk to him for 10 minutes, and then fight traffic going back for 45 minutes. And it was like, this is ridiculous. Bottom line is, a year and a half later, they decided to do a national search for emergency manager. And I won't talk too much about the guy who undercut me, but it was funny because there were 152 candidates. I made the final 2, and the guy who they picked, because I pissed the mayor off, I think, and he was a former cop. Because we were in a meeting one day, and he stand up, he's screaming at everybody. He says, "Who's in charge if something happens here? What's going?" And I kept on. I stood up, and my uniform with my tie on. I go, "I am, sir." I said, "I take full responsibility for anything that goes on in this house. It's mine. It falls on me." And everybody went, "Oh God, he just killed himself." I said, "But that's my job, right? Your job is you give your superior officers what they need to know, or make sure they don't get blindsided, but you handle what you can handle." He didn't like the fact there was a fire guy who was not challenging him, but just opening his mouth. So it was running on the wall. So they picked this other guy, which was great. They said, and the county manager tells me, he doesn't come bring me in. He calls me on the phone and says, "Hey, Bob, I got to tell you, we picked the other guy because he was picked as firefighter for the month in his old department." I said, that he came from a department with 10 people in North Carolina, 10 people. So every 10 years, you're firefighter of the month. And he said he'd gone through 4 or 5 storms. I have in my career probably close to 40 to 50 tropical storms and hurricanes. But it didn't matter. It was the way it was going to be. So I got back and I see the chief. He goes, "Okay, I have good news and bad news." I said, "Pile it on. Give me the bad news." He goes, "Well, because you're left that position, you're no longer an assistant chief. Now we have to move you back to division chief." I said, "It doesn't matter. I mean, to me, titles don't mean anything. It's like you walk into a restaurant, somebody says, 'I'm Dr. So-and-so.' That's nice. Have a seat behind the people who are not doctors who are waiting for the same table, So I said, "What's the good news?" He says, "The good news, I need you to start a Homeland Security division." And I said, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" He goes, "Anything you want." I went, "Oh my God." So I did. I started this thing. It was hugely successful. And I got a buddy. You may even know who he is. His name is Dan Wu. He works with the IAFF now. He's not their medical director, but he's if you look up a website, Danny Wu. Danny is a former highway patrolman. He's a firefighter paramedic, went to become a physician. He was one of our docs on the USAR team. And he gave up a private practice to come work for me at emergency management as one of my assistant directors. And he's one of my top 5 people. You know what I'm saying? You have 5 in your life that you can trust 100%. Not just your wife and your money, but my food too. But Danny's right when he goes, everything happens for a reason. I said, "Is this your Asian philosophy?" He goes, "No, you'll see. Everything happens for a reason," and it did. And everything, you're throwing projects, you're throwing things to do, and especially things that nobody else can handle sometimes. What do you have to lose, right? You take it on. If you didn't do it, that's one more try. But if you do it, go, hey, pretty good. So my whole career at the top was anywhere from 18 months to 2 years. Create projects, fix the problems, hand over the project to somebody else, and move to something else. It was fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a blast. Uh, you and I talked a little bit about September 11th, and I'll just kind of let you, but can you talk about that? What happened on 9/11?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't talk a lot about that. I was teaching a class. Uh, you familiar with the CERT program, Community Emergency Response Team? It's nationwide. At the time, it was a much smaller program. So I'm teaching a bunch of firefighters as instructors to be CERT instructors, and somebody comes in and goes, "Hey, turn TV on, watch the TV," and we're watching. And after the first plane hit, and we're not thinking anything of it, and one of the other guys go, we got to think of what we're going to do. I said, okay, do you guys want to cancel the class right now, or do you want to continue on? Because we don't have a whole lot of information as it goes. Almost everyone said, continue on. If we have to leave, we'll leave. Okay, fine. So we did that. Obviously, the second tower came down. So we got deployed, and the thing about that was interesting is my daughter, her birthday is October 8th of 2001. So my wife was 8 months pregnant at the time, and total approval on my leaving to go with the USAR team up to New York. Because we couldn't fly, we had to take buses. So we took multiple buses and a convoy of equipment and the whole bit. So we get up there, but we stopped at DC because we had an IST there, incident support team, and we saw the devastation what happened with the Pentagon. We went up to New York, and when you're going up there, you're thinking you're on a rescue mission. But as soon as you get up there and you see 23 acres of absolute devastation, you're on a recovery mission only. Um, One of the things, as the FEMA equivalent of firefighters, you wear on your USAR teams, they have FEMA shirts, FEMA jackets, and so on. We wore We didn't wear the FEMA jacket. We wore the blue pants. We had our gray shirt that said Miami-Dade Fire Rescue on the back and on our name on the front. Because the first thing we find is uh, there was a team from California gets up there. We heard about this, and they're posing for a group picture in front of the devastation. It's like, dude, we had people lost out there. You don't do this. That's not cool. And then the New York guys were flipping out. And they came to us, and I happened to talk to one of them. He goes, this is bullshit. You guys are up here. You just, doing all this. I said, listen, we're firefighters. I didn't know you were firefighters. We thought we were federal employees. I said, no, we're firefighters. And I showed them the shirt. I said, you tell us what you need us to do. You want us to go mow your lawn? You want us to go shopping? You want us to go take care of the kids, preparing for school? We're happy to do that. You guys need to be on this site, on this pile, to recover your brothers and sisters. We know that. And it calmed them down. And we did great with that up there. But it was 2 weeks of doing that, and you do what you can do. And I was working the Bravo shift, so it's an all nighter, and it was very interesting. We're up there with Florida Task Force 1, which is Miami Dade, and the tent next to us was Florida Task Force 2, which is City of Miami and a lot of municipalities across the East Coast. So like I was talking a little bit about Cuban coffee before. So we brought Sterno cans, and we were cooking Cuban coffee. And Cuban coffee is made in a little tiny container, and we call it Cuban crack or jet fuel because it's so strong. And all of a sudden, the smell is wafting across the entire thing. Texas Task Force team is like, guys, what is that? What is that? So these guys are starting to like, oh my God, we got them hooked in on this stuff. But we came back, we flew back because after that, obviously they let the planes go back in the air, and we got back just in time, and my daughter was born like 5 days later.
Oh, that's perfect timing. Sorry, I'm looking for something I can't find it. So my wife and I, we got married in 2016, and we went to for our honeymoon. We went to Saint Lucia, which just do a plug for that country. That place is absolutely amazing. Anybody who's never been there, I highly recommend it. We go to St. Lucia, and we are doing one of these boat tours. Every time you go to a resort, the resort's like, only do excursions with us. Can't trust the locals. Like they try to scare you away from them. We said, screw that. We're gonna try this out. So we go on this boat tour. It's called Benny's Boat Tour. And at the time, I was actually wearing a Las Vegas Fire Department shirt. I had traded shirts with somebody a long time ago, so I was wearing a Las Vegas Fire Department shirt. And I look over across from me on the boat, and there's this guy wearing an FDNY shirt. I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder if he's in the same boat I am, figuratively. So we get to a spot where we're gonna go snorkeling, and I did a little bit of snorkeling, nothing big, and he did the same thing, and we're sitting next to each other, and he looks over me and he says, "Are you on Las Vegas Fire?" And I said, "No, no, I'm small county in northeastern Indiana." But I asked him, I was like, "Are you on FDNY?" And he goes, "I am." He said, "In fact, I just retired." So we ended up hitting it off right off the bat, and he was telling me his story about where he was on 9/11. He had just gotten off shift that morning, which, like many New York firefighters, they weren't actually off shift. They all ended up going back. He said he had just gotten home. He stepped outside to he was mowing the lawn or doing some work outside or something, and he comes back in and he's got like 30 messages on his answering machine. So he starts playing them, and one of them is telling him to turn on the TV. So he turns on the TV while he's still listening to him, and he sees the devastation. And he tells me that he immediately dropped everything, headed back to his station. To this day, him and I text each other every September 11th. We check in on each other, see how everybody's doing, how the family's doing. Um, he, I have tried to convince him to let me interview him on the podcast. I think he's a little radio shy and camera shy, but we've talked about it before, and I'm hoping at some point I can get him on because he's got a heck of a story,
Oh
just
yeah,
just like you do. And um, but I think it's awesome that on especially on 9/11 when we had people from all over the country that were willing, even these the LA fires that were going on several months ago. There were people from all over the country that were offering to go out there. FDNY was one of
yeah,
them.
yeah,
Um, I think Chicago Fire might have offered to send some people, but everybody's willing to drop everything to go and spend however much time they need to help out. And I think that's awesome. You don't see that. You don't see that with, no offense to bankers, but you don't see bankers offering to go help across the country at another location or anything like that. And that's what makes the fire service as great as it is it truly is a family, not just within your department, but across the country.
yeah. Well, it's funny in a way because we joke around it. It's our second family, and it really is because we're spending one third of our life with a bunch of people. But the interesting thing about that is we know everybody's spouse, we know their kids. I was telling my wife today. I had a meeting early this morning with a division chief from Palm Beach County. He's now the airport rescue firefighting chief. I know the fire chief in Palm Beach. He's a friend. So we happened to we saw each other at a funeral. I think I was talking about Bill Guston, one of the best instructor in the world. Great guy. He passed away, and I saw these guys at the memorial services. And he asked if I would talk to him. I said, absolutely. Just tell me, when it is. Uh, I met him briefly. He introduced himself, and he gives me his last name. I went, wait a minute. I knew a guy on Miami Dade with that name. And I said, and I gave him the guy his first name. He goes, that was my dad. I said, I knew your dad. And I went over and gave him a bro hug because his dad passed away like 3 years ago. And I was telling my wife how what a small world it is initially because I said, can you imagine when I got on in '84 and I was working at one of these slow stations where the dad worked because he was a cop at first and came with the fire service. And somebody said, hey, Bob, you are going to meet in 40 years with Guy's son who hasn't been born yet and talk business about airport fire rescue. I said, I don't know anything about airport fire rescue. That was the first clue. And you're going to talk to a kid, but I had two guys in the apartment who I knew. There's a guy now who's a captain. I know him since he's 2 years old. Another one, I know he's a division chief. I know him since he's 4 years old, and others. And my son's on the department now, and he's been on 8 years. And it's just funny how I won't say it's a legacy necessarily, but it's something. And it's not the family business, but it's like anything else. You get into what you know, what you see, and like you said, we are different. The fire service, cops are the closest thing to us, and military, because you live and breathe with these guys next to you, and unfortunately you die with them too. But when you take somebody out of the situations that we're in, they don't have that same mindset. They're going home, they shut everything off if possible, and they go about their business. Where our social circles become the fire service. I had a problem with my wife at one point. You and your son, Kyle, need to stop talking fire shop every time we get together for family, you know. And every time we get together, a bunch of people, the guys start talking about the fires and the calls, and the wives all fold their arms and look at us like, "Here we go again." But they understand and they support us. That's the thing, and the spouses support what the firefighters doing. It's special, but it's a bond that people don't realize. Yeah, it's literally made in fire. If you think about it.
Yeah. So I want to start wrapping some things up here, and we spent a little bit of time with you, but I want to ask you: are you familiar with a man named Chief Ike? Everybody calls him Chief Ike.
No,
So Chief Ike, name is Kurt I Isaacson. Isaacson, I think I said
I
that
have
right.
heard that name.
Yeah. So
I don't know where, but I know I've
there,
heard it
he's a battalion chief in Escambia County Fire Rescue, and there in Florida.
in Florida.
Um, but the reason why I bring this up, this has kind of been a hot topic, and I've been wanting to talk about this for a little while. So I'm going to read this. This is one of the many uh, posts that are going around, but it says Chief Ike left Thursday for a 45-day inpatient treatment program at the IAFF Center for Excellence in Maryland, which specializes in PTSD for firefighters. As he was boarding the plane Thursday morning, he received a letter from Escambia County informing him that his time off request has been denied. I don't know a whole lot of the information on this. However, this is probably one of thousands of stories that I have heard people tell me of somebody who recognizes that there's an issue and they're going and getting some kind of help, and they have uh you know try to do things the right way, right? They put in for time off, they do everything, and they either gets denied. I was talking to somebody who was a police officer, and they were afraid to admit that something was wrong because everybody was going to look at them differently. They were going to get their gun and their badge taken away out of
Yeah.
fear. This is just, it continues to be an ongoing issue across the country. So, my question to you is, with all of the things that you've seen and you've dealt with over the years, what kind of advice would you offer to people who are brand new? They don't even have to be brand new, but people that are in the fire service or people that are interested in getting in the fire service, on how to prepare themselves or how to take care of themselves from the awful things that they're going to see.
Well, to start with, I think the attitude towards mental health in the fire service has changed significantly over the past 40 plus years. Even in 2001, it was basically you came back from World Trade Center, put your big boy pants on, go back to work. And we're talking about things we saw the other day, but there was one call, and I think it's in the book about how we came back one call, multiple shootings, drenched in blood from head to toe, and laughing about it. And that's not necessarily normal, you know. And we desensitize ourselves to everything that's out there. And like I was saying before, you can take your personal problems from home to work, but you don't want to take your work problems home I was bad about that too, and I didn't realize I was doing that. Okay, so working in the busiest stations and working there for years and years, It was a running joke. I saw black circles under my eyes, and I thought that's just congenital. That's what I look like until I got off the shift work, and they went away after about 6 weeks. So the whole idea is, and I didn't write about it in this book, but I've discussed it, and then I want to just talk a little bit about the fact that when Bill Guston passed away, they had peer counselors go into the stations, and they reached out to us retirees and said, "Would any of you want to be drivers to drive the peer counselors around?" So I volunteered, and going back now probably 10 plus years or more, I've been going to therapy because I keep everything in. I had major anger issues. I wouldn't share that crap with anybody. It's like, no, this is me. Deal with it, the whole thing, and it comes home on your family. So when I did this, and they said we're going to assign you Battalion 5, your old battalion, so you know the guys. I said, what are you looking from me? You want me to be a fly on the wall and just listen, or do you want me to say anything? They said, we want you to speak because you have the experience of working here. The guys will listen to you. So okay. So we went all the different stations, and I let the guys talk. And the peer council was doing the most talking. They turned to me and go, you want to add anything? I said, sure. I said, we have this tendency to hide how we feel constantly. And everybody has different trigger points, right? Everybody, and Pete, now they're recognizing PTSD in fire service as much as police and military. And it was blown off for years. So I said, I told him, I said, look, I've gone through therapy for quite a while. And people look at me like, you? I said, yeah, me. You know, the hard ass, everybody knows. No, you've got it. That's the thing. You've got to realize on the inside, you got to it's like an onion, tear it apart and find what's wrong. Um, but I also told him, I said, look, it isn't everybody 100% of the people, but most of us have some kind of demons that are inside tearing at us. And we need help. We can't do it on our own. And what I actually did was I went through this what they call light bar therapy. I think the acronym is MSMD. And what happened was they have you sit, and the therapist, this was not my normal therapist, he said, I'm sending you to this specialist. She was one of the creators of this, and she's about ready to retire, so you'll probably be her last patient. So she went and says, okay, what I need from you is your 10 to 15 10 or 15 worst calls you've ever seen. I'm going, really? That's it? That's all I got. So I do go through that. She gives me, okay, now we take them in a couple sessions, we flesh them out, look and see what we got. And then with the therapy, she did was, and I'm compressing this and fast forwarding this. So there's a light bar you sit in front of, and you're not supposed to move your head, but you move your eyes. And when she starts, the light goes back and forth, and you just move your eyes back and forth. And she starts talking about one of the calls. One of the calls being the one I talked about, where you actually had to cut the kid's leg off to get to the other kids, things like that. And she's bringing things up that she says are very deep in your mind that cause these anger issues, these things that you don't want to talk about, but it manifests in different ways. Whether some people cry, I don't cry, I still can't cry, but I blow it off. I make a big deal out of it. I'll blow it off and start screaming or something. Not as much as I used to, but it was very interesting over time. She says, you won't forget these calls, but you won't dwell on them internally. And she's right. She went through these, and I was like, okay, I can remember the call itself, but I can't remember. The details are very fuzzy. It doesn't mean anything. But what I learned about that is too, talking to other guys this is key. Is opening up and talking to people and showing them that we're all like this. We talk about paying it forward. We talk about mentoring. We talk about making sure we give the guys the right tools. This is a tool that they need to have, an essential tool, because bottom line is what we want to do. We want to make sure our guys go home safe after every shift, but we want them to go home when they retire and enjoy themselves in whatever way. And one of the things I looked at all the time was when I had a guy retire, and we make a big deal about a firefighter getting his first badge and a lieutenant, somebody getting promoted. There's a big ceremony. There's no ceremony for a retiree. It's all what the guys at the station will put on for them. And part of that was, well, I would get these guys, and they have to sign off all their gear at the end of the stuff. And I said, bring it to me, and I'll get all the sign-offs, because nobody's going to tell me no, and I'll take full responsibility for it. Then I tell one of the secretaries, bring him or bring her into the big conference room, get some pastelitos, which, bakery stuff, Cuban coffee, get everybody and say, come in, thanks for your service. Now, we should have had family and everything else. And I'm a big believer in, I ask them, and a lot of guys I know do this, say, so what are you going to do? You going to travel? Or you going to, he said, nah, I don't have any plans. I said, hey, are you gonna, he says, I may take up golf. Sorry, we don't take up golf at our age. You're either playing golf or you're not playing golf. Same thing with fishing, right? You don't suddenly grab a rod and reel and be a fisherman. So that's a little bit of a red flag. And what we want to do is make sure that, the programs are out there now, internally and externally, to help people like that, give them the opportunity. I can't remember the guy, the cartoonist. You've seen him before. God, what's his name?
All Combs.
Paul Combs does great.
Yep.
And he has
He's
so
about
many.
an hour from my house.
Really, man, I'd love to meet that guy one day. But he does so many of these things, which is perfect for what we go through. Here, it's like you're not saying anything, but there's a big sign on your face saying, "I'm going through this right now." And I think we're getting there slowly, but it's evolving. And again, I think it's imperative that guys in the fire service, because we're second family, need to look out for someone. Go back to have a bad day, fine. Bad day turn a bad week. What's going on? You got family problems, you got financial problems, let us know. And I know there's a lot of people that do that, but when you work at the slower stations, everybody has a tendency to go off their own way. They don't sit at the table and scream and yell and do this. But there's a lot of right ways of doing it. But the other part is there's a lot of trigger points for us. Some of us have much tougher skin, some don't. But it's not somebody is better than somebody else. It's simply matter of fact of we have to look at all of these and make sure nobody does it. Our suicide rate in the fire service is ridiculous. We have lost in Miami-Dade, we lost five to suicides in the past year and a half.
That's insane. Trying to look up the latest stats here. As of April 28th, there have been 28 on-duty firefighter fatalities in the United States, but that's not the stats I'm looking for. There's actually a website that keeps track of specifically suicides within fire, police, EMS, dispatch.
I've seen it, but I can't tell you where it is.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'll find it. Well, Bob, I definitely appreciate you joining me. I've got a big storm rolling through here, so I got to batten down the hatches.
Okay.
But this has been a great conversation. I, again, really appreciate you joining and discussing your life story and your career. For everybody that is listening, highly recommend you check out Bob's book. It's called Never on a 10. I am several chapters in right now, and it is an amazing book. I definitely love it. I'm going to finish it between now and as I'm on the plane to Orlando. So,
yeah.
Bob, thanks again.
I appreciate that. There's also an audio version for the younger group that I was suggested, like we talking about my buddy Charlie, who calls himself my publicist. Now I go, I have a publicist? You got to be kidding me, man. But yeah, Tyler, I thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity. And if you ever want me back on again, I'm happy to do so.
Oh, that is an open invite. You're welcome anytime.
Cool. You just give me a call, man. I'll be here.
Will do. Thanks, Bob.
After you finish the book, right?
Yes.
All
Yes,
right.
I definitely want to finish the book.
All right, man. Take care. Be safe.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Talk to you later.